Your place is in the nursing home. Heir abandons his father, but upon returning for the inheritance he was shocked. The sun was setting over the imposing headquarters of Whitaker Industries, painting the sky in golden and reddish hues. In the boardroom on the top floor, where so many crucial decisions had been made over the years, there was a palpable tension. Richard Whitaker, family patriarch and founder of the company, looked incredulously at his two sons, Charles and Andrew, as he tried to process the words he had just heard. Sell the company? Have you lost your minds? Richard's voice trembled, a mixture of anger and pain. This company is my life's work, our family's legacy. Charles, the older of the brothers, leaned forward in his leather chair, his eyes cold and calculating. Dad, you have to understand. The market is changing. If we don't sell now, we'll lose the opportunity to get maximum profit. Andrew, the younger one, nodded in agreement with his brother, though a shadow of doubt briefly crossed his face. It's best for everyone, Dad. You can retire comfortably without worries. Richard stood up, placing his hands on the mahogany table. Retirement? You think that's what I want? This company isn't just a business. It's my life, my passion. Every brick, every contract, every employee, it all means something to me. That's precisely why you can't see things clearly, Charles interjected, his tone impatient. You're too emotionally attached. We see the big picture. The big picture. Richard let out a bitter laugh. All I see is my own sons betraying everything I taught them, everything your mother and I worked so hard for. The mention of their late mother made Andrew lower his gaze, but Charles remained unfazed. Times change, Dad, Charles said, standing up. And frankly, your place is no longer here. You've done a good job, but it's time for you to step aside. Richard felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Step aside? Is this how you thank me for everything I've done for you? We thank you, Andrew said, his voice soft but firm. But the decision has been made. The board of directors has already given their preliminary approval. What? Richard looked around, realizing he was alone in this battle. When? How? It's been a long process, Charles explained. And to be honest, your place is in the nursing home, Dad. You'll be comfortable and well cared for there. Charles's words fell like a hammer on Richard. The nursing home? You're sending me to a nursing home. It's for your own good, Andrew insisted, though he couldn't look his father in the eye. You need to rest, and we need to handle this without emotional distractions. Richard looked at his sons, searching for some trace of the children he had once raised with love and dedication, but he found only ambition and coldness in their eyes. Please, Richard pleaded, his voice breaking. Don't do this to me. Don't destroy what we built. Charles approached his father, placing a hand on his shoulder. The decision is made, Dad. It's best for everyone. Tomorrow we'll take you to the nursing home. It's a beautiful place. You'll like it. Richard slumped into his chair, defeated. As his sons left the boardroom, animatedly discussing the details of the sale, he remained there alone, watching the sun finally set on the horizon. With darkness falling over the city, Richard felt darkness invading his heart as well. At that moment, looking out the window at the city that had seen his empire grow, Richard Whitaker knew that his life, as he knew it, had come to an end. The luxurious Golden Sunset nursing home stood majestically on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by lush gardens and marble fountains. To any outside observer, it seemed like a paradise of tranquility and comfort. However, for Richard Whitaker, it was a gilded cage, a constant reminder of his son's betrayal and the end of everything he had built. Sitting on a garden bench, Richard observed without really seeing the flowers surrounding him. His mind was far away, in memories of a life dedicated to building an empire. How did we get here, Elizabeth? He murmured, speaking to the memory of his late wife. Where did we go wrong with the boys? A month had passed since Charles and Andrew had installed him in the nursing home. A month of sleepless nights, empty days, of a loneliness that weighed on his soul. Mr. Whitaker, a soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. It was Sarah, a young nurse who always had a kind smile for him. It's time for your medicine. Richard nodded distractedly, taking the pills she offered. Thank you, Sarah, you're very kind. Sarah sat beside him, noticing the sadness in the old man's eyes. Do you want to talk about it, Mr. Whitaker? For a moment, Richard considered rejecting the offer, but there was something in Sarah's sincere gaze that made him open up, You know, when I started my company, I had nothing but a dream and Elizabeth's hand, he began, his voice laden with nostalgia. We worked day and night, sacrificed so much, and it was all for them, for Charles and Andrew. We wanted to give them a bright future. Sarah listened attentively, her heart moved by every word. And now, Richard continued, his voice breaking, now they've thrown it all away. They've sold not just the company, but our legacy, our values. I'm so sorry, Mr. Whittaker, said Sarah, gently placing her hand on his. It must be very painful. Richard nodded, grateful for the company and understanding. It is, Sarah. But you know what's worse? I can't even hate them. They're my children, and despite everything, I love them. Meanwhile, in the offices of Whittaker Industries, now rebranded as Global Innovations Inc., Charles and Andrew were celebrating the closing of the sale with champagne and laughter. To us, brother, exclaimed Charles, raising his glass. We're finally free to do things our way. Andrew clinked his glass with Charles's, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Yes, to us, he murmured. What's wrong? Asked Charles, noticing his brother's lack of enthusiasm. Don't tell me you're having second thoughts. Andrew shook his head. No, it's not that. It's just, don't you think we were a bit harsh on Dad? Charles snorted, his expression hardening. Don't start with that, Andrew. We did what we had to do. Dad was no longer fit to handle this. Now we have the world at our feet. I guess you're right, conceded Andrew, though a part of him was still doubtful. Of course I am, Charles affirmed confidently. Now forget about that. We need to plan our next move. I was thinking about diversifying our investments, maybe getting into the real estate market. While the brothers discussed their expansion plans at the nursing home, Richard was looking at an old family photograph. In it, Charles and Andrew, still children, smiled alongside him and Elizabeth in front of the company's first headquarters. "Oh, Elizabeth," whispered Richard, caressing the image of his wife, "if you could see what our boys have become." Sarah, who was passing by, stopped upon hearing the whisper. She saw the solitary tear rolling down Richard's cheek and felt her heart constrict. At that moment she made a decision. She would do everything possible to help this man regain his dignity and, if possible, reconnect with his children. What no one knew at that moment was that Charles and Andrew's actions were about to trigger a series of events that would shake the foundations of the Whittaker family and change the course of their lives forever. The morning sun filtered through the enormous windows of the luxury penthouse that Charles Whittaker now called home. Sitting in front of his computer, he reviewed the latest figures from the investments he had made with the money from the sale of the family business. His face, usually confident and arrogant, showed signs of worry. "This can't be," he muttered to himself, running a hand through his perfectly groomed hair. The investments he had made, those that promised quick and exorbitant gains, were showing significant losses. The sound of the doorbell pulled him from his thoughts. It was Andrew who entered with an expression of concern on his face. "Charles, we need to talk," Andrew said, not bothering to greet him. "Things aren't going as we planned." Charles slammed his laptop shut, irritated by the interruption. "What are you talking about? Everything is under control." Andrew shook his head, pulling some documents from his briefcase. "I've been reviewing the numbers, brother. The investments you made, they're too risky. We're losing millions." "They're temporary fluctuations," Charles responded, dismissing his brother's concerns. "The market will recover." "And if it doesn't?" Andrew insisted. "Charles, this isn't a game. We're talking about Dad's legacy, everything he worked for." The mention of their father made Charles visibly tense. "Don't bring Dad into this. He has nothing to do with our business anymore." "Maybe that was our mistake," Andrew murmured, more to himself than to his brother. Meanwhile, at the Golden Sunset nursing home, Richard Whittaker was walking through the gardens with Sarah. The young nurse had managed little by little to pull the old man out of his depression, encouraging him to participate in activities and share his stories. "You know, Mr. Whittaker," Sarah said as they sat on a bench, "I think you still have a lot to offer the world." Richard looked at her curiously. "What do you mean, Sarah?" "Well, with all your business experience and your desire to help others, why not start a project right here in the nursing home? Something that could benefit the residents and maybe even the community." Richard's eyes lit up for the first time in months. You know, I always wanted to implement more social projects in the company, but I never found the right moment." Sarah smiled, excited to see that spark of passion in Richard. "Well, this could be the moment. We could start with something small, maybe a mentoring program for young entrepreneurs." While Richard and Sarah enthusiastically discussed the possibilities, in Charles's office, the tension between the Whittaker brothers was reaching its boiling point. "You can't keep making decisions without consulting me," Andrew shouted, slamming his fist on the desk in frustration. "We're partners. We're supposed to decide together." Charles stood up, his face red with anger. "I'm the one with the vision here, Andrew. If I had listened to you, we'd still be stuck in the same boring market as always." "At least that boring market was stable and profitable," Andrew replied. "What you're doing is pure speculation." "You're a coward, just like Dad," Charles spat. "That's why we had to get him out of the way. None of you have what it takes to succeed in today's world." Charles's words hit Andrew like a slap. "I can't believe what I'm hearing. Are you listening to yourself, Charles? What have you become?" "Someone successful," Charles responded with disdain. "Something you'll never understand." Andrew looked at his brother for a long moment, as if seeing him for the first time. Then, without saying another word, he turned around and left the office, leaving Charles alone with his arrogance and his plummeting investments. That night, as Charles drowned himself in expensive whiskey, trying to ignore the growing feeling that everything was falling apart around him, Andrew drove aimlessly through the city, his mind a whirlwind of guilt, regret, and fear for the future. And at the nursing home, Richard Whittaker went to bed with a smile on his lips for the first time in months, his mind full of ideas for the project he had discussed with Sarah. Without knowing it, he was planting the seeds of a change that would affect not only his life, but that of many others. The next morning, Andrew woke up in his car, parked in front of the old family home. With dark circles under his eyes and his suit wrinkled, he looked at the facade of the house where he grew up, remembering simpler and happier times. With a sigh, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in a long time. "Hello? Golden Sunset Nursing Home? I'd like to speak with Richard Whittaker, please." Meanwhile, at the offices of Global Innovations, Inc., Charles entered with a determined stride, ignoring the concerned looks from employees. News of the losses had leaked, and the atmosphere was tense. "Mr. Whittaker," his assistant intercepted him, visibly nervous. "There's an urgent call from the investors. They're demanding an emergency meeting." Charles cursed under his breath. "Tell them I'll be available in an hour. And get me the latest financial reports. We're going to turn this around." At the nursing home, Richard was in the middle of an animated discussion with a group of residents when a nurse approached. "Mr. Whittaker, you have a call. It's your son, Andrew." Richard's heart skipped a beat. With trembling hands, he took the phone. "Andrew? Son, is that you?" "Dad," Andrew's voice sounded broken. I'm so sorry, can we talk?" As father and son began a conversation filled with pent-up emotions and painful truths, Sarah worked in her small office, developing the plan for Richard's project. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and soon other staff members joined to help. "This could be really big," commented a colleague reviewing Sarah's notes. "Mr. Whittaker has connections that could make this a reality." Sarah nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "And not just that. He has the heart and vision to do something truly meaningful." As the day progressed, the lives of the Whittakers took unexpected turns. Andrew, after a long and emotional conversation with his father, decided to visit the nursing home in person. Charles, meanwhile, faced a furious and demanding board of directors, struggling to maintain control of a situation that was slipping through his fingers. When Andrew arrived at the nursing home, he was surprised to find his father surrounded by people, animatedly discussing plans and projects. Richard, upon seeing his son, stopped short. "Andrew," he said, his voice a mixture of surprise and emotion. "My boy." Father and son embraced, years of distance and misunderstandings melting away in that moment. Sarah, observing the scene from afar, felt her eyes moisten. "Dad, I've been an idiot," Andrew began, his voice breaking with emotion. "I failed you, I failed us all." Richard shook his head, placing his hands on his son's shoulders. "No, Andrew, I made mistakes too. But you're here now, and that's what matters." As father and son began to rebuild their relationship, In the offices of Global Innovations Inc., Charles faced a perfect storm. Investors demanded answers, stocks were in freefall, and rumors of a possible bankruptcy began to circulate. "This is unacceptable, Whitaker," one of the board members shouted. "You've brought this company to the brink of the abyss." Charles, sweating and with his tie loosened, tried to maintain his composure. "It's just a phase. The market will recover. I have a plan." "Your plans have led us to this," another member interrupted. "I think it's time to consider a change in leadership." While Charles watched his house of cards begin to crumble at the nursing home, Richard shared with Andrew his ideas for the new project. "It's ambitious, Dad," Andrew said, reviewing the plans. "But I think it could work. And more importantly, it could make a real difference." Richard smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time. "With your help, son, I know we can make it happen." Sarah, who had joined the conversation, couldn't help but feel a special connection with Andrew. There was something in his sincere regret and his desire to make things right that resonated deeply with her. As the sun set over the city, the lives of the Whitakers were in full transformation. Richard and Andrew, reunited after so long, began to heal old wounds and forge a new path together. Charles, for his part, faced the consequences of his unbridled ambition, seeing how everything he had fought for crumbled around him. And in the midst of all this, Sarah realized that she had come to be part of something much bigger than she had ever imagined. The project she had helped initiate was taking on a life of its own, with the potential to change not only Richard's life, but that of many others. That night, as the city prepared to sleep, the seeds of change planted that day began to germinate, promising a future that none of them could have anticipated. The following days were a whirlwind of activity at Golden Sunset Nursing Home. Richard and Andrew, with Sarah's tireless help, worked day and night on their mentoring project for young entrepreneurs. Richard's energy and enthusiasm were contagious, attracting more and more residents and staff to participate. Meanwhile, in the corporate world, Charles's fall was as swift as his rise had been. News of Global Innovations Inc.'s massive losses had leaked to the press, and the company's stock was plummeting uncontrollably. One morning, as Richard and Andrew were having breakfast together at the nursing home, discussing the latest details of their project, Sarah rushed in with a newspaper in hand. "Mr. Whitaker, Andrew, you need to see this," she said, handing them the paper. The headline was shocking. "Whitaker Empire on the brink of collapse. Charles Whitaker faces fraud investigation." Richard paled, his hands trembling as he read the article. Andrew, for his part, felt a mixture of shock and guilt. "Oh God, Charles," Richard murmured. "What have you done?" Andrew stood up, determination on his face. "I have to go see him, Dad. I can't leave him alone in this, no matter what he's done." Richard nodded, a mixture of pride and concern in his eyes. "Go, son. But be careful." As Andrew prepared to leave, Sarah stopped him at the door. "Andrew," she said softly, "I know he's your brother, but don't let this destroy all the progress you've made." Andrew looked at her, surprised by the intensity of her concern. "Thank you, Sarah. I won't. I promise." In the city center, Charles Whitaker was locked in his office, blinds closed, ignoring the incessant calls and knocks on the door. His world was crumbling around him, and for the first time in his life, he didn't have a plan. The sound of the door opening startled him. He expected to see police or perhaps hungry, scandal-seeking reporters. Instead, he saw his brother. "Andrew," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" Andrew approached slowly, seeing the deplorable state of his brother. "I came to help you, Charles. You're my brother, no matter what's happened." For a moment, Charles's mask of arrogance cracked, and Andrew saw the scared boy who had once been his little brother. Without saying another word, Andrew hugged Charles, who finally broke down, years of repressed emotions coming to the surface. While the Whitaker brothers began the painful process of confronting the truth and seeking a way out at the nursing home, Richard and Sarah continued working on the project. "For you know, Sarah," Richard said as they reviewed some documents, "I've never properly thanked you for everything you've done." Sarah smiled, a slight blush tinting her cheeks. "You don't have to thank me, Mr. Whitaker. I do it because I believe in you and in this project." Richard looked at her with fatherly affection. "You're an extraordinary young woman, Sarah. You remind me a lot of my Elizabeth when she was young, always seeing the best in people, always willing to help. Sarah felt a warmth in her heart at the comparison. Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. That means a lot to me. As the day progressed, news of Charles's situation spread throughout the city. At the nursing home, residents and staff gathered around Richard, offering their support and comfort. Mr. Whitaker, said one of the residents, a retired former executive, if there's anything we can do to help, just say the word. Richard, moved by the support, realized he had found a new family at the nursing home. Thank you all. Your support means more than I can express. That night, Andrew returned to the nursing home, tired but determined. He found his father and Sarah still working in the small office they had adapted for the project. Charles is in serious trouble, Dad, Andrew said, slumping into a chair, but I think we can help him. It won't be easy, and he'll have to face the consequences of his actions, but all is not lost. Richard nodded, a mixture of sadness and hope in his eyes. We'll do whatever is necessary, son. We're a family, after all. Sarah, observing the interaction between father and son, felt a wave of admiration. Despite everything they had been through, they remained united, willing to support each other. Mr. Whitaker, Andrew, she said, an idea forming in her mind. What if we incorporated Charles into the project somehow? It could be a form of redemption for him, and his experience could be valuable. Andrew and Richard looked at each other, surprised by the suggestion. After a moment of reflection, Richard smiled. Sarah, you're brilliant. That could be exactly the opportunity Charles needs to reconnect with what really matters. As they discussed the details of how they could integrate Charles into the project, a sense of hope filled the room. Despite the challenges they faced, the Whitaker family was finding its way back to unity. That night, as the moon gently illuminated the nursing home gardens, Richard looked out the window, thinking about how much things had changed in such a short time. With Andrew by his side, Sarah supporting them, and the possibility of helping Charles redeem himself, he felt that, for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. What none of them knew was that fate had even more surprises in store for the Whitaker family, and that the real challenge was just beginning. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. While Andrew worked tirelessly to help Charles navigate the legal maze he faced, Richard and Sarah continued developing their mentoring project at the nursing home. One afternoon, as Richard was reviewing some documents in his room, Sarah entered with an expression of excitement on her face. Mr. Whitaker, she exclaimed, I just received a call. The Bright Hope Foundation is interested in our project. They want to meet with us to discuss a possible collaboration. Richard removed his glasses, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. That's wonderful, Sarah. The Bright Hope Foundation has an excellent reputation. Their support could be just what we need to take this project to the next level. As they discussed the details of the meeting, Andrew arrived, looking tired but determined. Dad, Sarah, he said, slumping into a chair. I have news about Charles. Richard and Sarah looked at him expectantly. The prosecutor's office is willing to make a deal, Andrew continued. If Charles cooperates fully, returns the misused funds, and agrees to participate in a community service program, they could significantly reduce the charges. Richard let out a sigh of relief. Thank God. And how is Charles? Andrew ran a hand through his hair. He's remorseful. I think he's finally realizing the magnitude of his mistakes. In fact, he added, looking at Sarah, he mentioned he'd like to talk to you about the project. I think your idea of including him could be just what he needs. Sarah smiled, a mixture of surprise and satisfaction on her face. I'm glad to hear that. We all deserve a second chance. The following days were a frenzy of preparations. Richard and Sarah immersed themselves in planning for the meeting with the Bright Hope Foundation, while Andrew continued working on Charles's legal case. A week later, the day of the meeting arrived. Richard, dressed in his best suit, was nervous but excited. Sarah, by his side, reviewed the notes one last time. Everything will be fine, Mr. Whitaker, she said, giving him a reassuring smile. Our project is solid and your experience is invaluable. Just as they were about to leave, Andrew came running, out of breath. Wait, he exclaimed. Charles is here. He wants to talk to you before the meeting. Richard and Sarah exchanged looks of surprise. Moments later, Charles entered the room. He looked different, thinner and with dark circles under his eyes, but there was a humility in his eyes they had never seen before. "Dad, Sarah," Charles began, his voice trembling. "I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I want to make things right. If you'll allow me, I'd like to accompany you to the meeting. Maybe I can contribute something." Richard looked at his older son, seeing for the first time in years the boy he had once been. Without saying a word, he approached and hugged him tightly. "Of course you can come, son," Richard said with tears in his eyes. "You're part of this family and you always will be." Sarah, moved by the scene, nodded in agreement. "Your experience could be very valuable, Charles. Welcome to the team." And so the four of them headed to the meeting with the Bright Hope Foundation. The presentation was a resounding success. Richard spoke passionately about the importance of mentoring young entrepreneurs. Sarah presented the project details with clarity and enthusiasm, and to everyone's surprise, Charles intervened at various points, contributing valuable ideas on how to make the program more effective and sustainable. At the end of the meeting, the Foundation's director, Isabel Vega, was visibly impressed. "Mr. Whitaker, Sarah," she said with a smile, "I must say I'm pleasantly surprised, not only by the solidity of your project, but by the spirit of collaboration and redemption I see here. The Bright Hope Foundation would be delighted to support this initiative." The joy in the room was palpable. Richard hugged his sons, tears of happiness in his eyes. Sarah, moved, couldn't help but join the family embrace. As they left the meeting, Charles approached Sarah. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for believing in me, for giving me this opportunity. I promise I won't let you down." Sarah smiled warmly at him. "We all deserve a second chance, Charles. What's important is what we do with it." In the months that followed, the project flourished beyond their most optimistic expectations. The mentoring program expanded rapidly, helping dozens of young entrepreneurs launch their businesses. Richard found a new passion in sharing his experience. Charles worked tirelessly to redeem himself through his participation in the project, and Andrew discovered he had a natural talent for management and mediation. Sarah, for her part, became the heart of the project. Her compassion, combined with her sharp intelligence and organizational skills, made her a fundamental piece of the program's success. One afternoon, as they celebrated the project's first anniversary, Richard gathered everyone together. "I want to thank you," he began, his voice laden with emotion, "my sons, for finding your way back to our family. Sarah, for being the light that guided us in our darkest moment. And to everyone who has made this project a success. We've built something beautiful here, something that goes beyond business. We've built a community." As everyone applauded and hugged, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Andrew, looking at her with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something that made her heart beat a little faster. "None of this would have been possible without you," Andrew said softly. "You've changed our lives, Sarah." Sarah smiled, feeling a warmth in her cheeks. "You've changed mine too," she responded. As the celebration continued around them, Sarah looked at the Whitaker family, now united and stronger than ever. She had come to love them all, Richard with his wisdom and compassion, Charles on his path to redemption, and Andrew, whose quiet strength and determination had captivated her. What Sarah didn't know was that fate had more surprises in store for all of them. The success of the project had attracted the attention of powerful people, some with good intentions and others not so much. And soon, the Whitaker family and Sarah would find themselves facing new challenges that would test their unity and determination like never before. The success of the Whitakers' mentoring project did not go unnoticed. Soon, offers of collaboration and expansion proposals began to arrive from all over the country. Richard, Charles, and Andrew worked tirelessly to maintain the integrity of the program while exploring new opportunities. One afternoon, as Sarah was organizing some documents in the project office, she received an unexpected call. "Hello?" she answered. "Sarah Thompson?" asked a deep voice on the other end of the line. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" "My name is Jack Sullivan. I'm an old associate of Richard Whitaker. I need to speak with him urgently. It's about a matter from the past that could affect your current project." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan, but Mr. Whitaker is in a meeting. Can I take a message?" "Just tell him I called," Jack responded, his voice laden with a veiled threat. "He'll know what it's about." After hanging up, Sarah remained thoughtful. Something about that call had deeply unsettled her. That night, during the family dinner at the nursing home, Sarah shared the information about the mysterious call. Richard visibly paled upon hearing Jack Sullivan's name. "Dad," said Andrew, noticing his father's reaction, "who is this man? Why have you gone so pale?" Richard sighed deeply, running a hand over his tired face. "Jack Sullivan is a name I hoped never to hear again. He was a partner in the early days of the company. We had a disagreement many years ago and things ended badly." "What kind of disagreement?" asked Charles, his voice laden with concern. Richard looked at his sons and Sarah, hesitating for a moment. Finally, he made a decision. "I think it's time you knew the whole truth. 30 years ago, when the company was just starting, Jack and I made some questionable decisions to secure an important contract." Silence fell over the table as Richard continued his story. He spoke of bribes, of bid rigging, of practices that, although common at that time, were now viewed in a very different light. "When I realized how deep we had fallen, I decided to cut ties with Jack and clean up the company. He didn't take it well. He threatened to expose me, but I managed to convince him that it would be worse for him if he talked. Since then, I hadn't heard from him." Andrew and Charles looked at their father with a mixture of shock and disappointment. Sarah, for her part, felt her heart constrict as she saw the pain in Richard's eyes. "Dad," Andrew finally said, breaking the heavy silence, "why are you telling us this now?" "Because I fear Jack has decided to use this information to blackmail us," Richard responded, his voice laden with regret. "With the success of the project, we have a lot to lose if this story comes to light." Charles, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "We can't allow this to destroy everything we've built. There must be a way to handle this." Sarah, sensing the tension in the room, intervened. "Mr. Whitaker, I know this is difficult, but I think transparency could be our best defense. If we get ahead of Jack and are honest about the past, we take away the power of his threats." Richard looked at Sarah with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "You're right, Sarah. I've carried this secret for too long. It's time to face the past and take responsibility for my actions." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Richard, with the support of his sons and Sarah, prepared a public statement detailing the events of the past. They decided to organize a press conference to address the issue directly. The morning of the conference, as they were preparing, Jack Sullivan appeared at the nursing home. "Richard," he said, his voice laden with bitterness, "I see you've decided to play offense. Very clever." Richard faced him calmly. "It's over, Jack. No more secrets, no more threats. We're willing to face the consequences of our past actions." Jack smiled disdainfully. "You think it's that simple? What will happen to your precious project when the world knows the truth about the great Richard Whitaker?" It was then that Andrew stepped forward. "Our project is based on the idea of redemption and growth. My father's honesty will only strengthen that message." Sarah, standing next to the Whitaker family, added, "True legacy isn't perfection, Mr. Sullivan, but the ability to recognize our mistakes and work to correct them." Jack looked at each of them, realizing that his blackmail plan was crumbling before his eyes. With a final growl of frustration, he turned and left. The press conference was a turning point. Richard, with his sons and Sarah by his side, spoke honestly about the mistakes of the past and how they had influenced his determination to create a project based on ethics and social responsibility. To everyone's surprise, the public reaction was mostly positive. Richard's transparency and genuine remorse resonated with many people. The project, far from being destroyed by this revelation, gained even more support. That night, as the Whitaker family and Sarah celebrated the unexpected outcome, Richard raised his glass. "To honesty, to second chances, and to family," he said, looking lovingly at his sons and Sarah. "Thank you for standing by my side in this difficult moment." As they toasted, Andrew couldn't help but look at Sarah with admiration. Her strength and wisdom had been fundamental in overcoming this crisis, and at that moment, he realized that his feelings for her went beyond gratitude and respect. What none of them knew was that this test was just the beginning. Richard's past had been exposed, but there were still secrets to be revealed, secrets that would test family bonds and the budding love between Andrew and Sarah in ways none of them could have imagined. In the weeks following the press conference, the Whitaker Mentoring Project experienced unprecedented growth. Richard's honesty had struck a chord with the public, attracting more sponsors and volunteers than ever before. One afternoon, as Andrew and Sarah were working late in the office, reviewing applications from new mentors, they found themselves alone for the first time in a long while. "Sarah," Andrew began, his voice soft, "I never properly thanked you for everything you've done for my family. Your strength and compassion, you've changed us all." Sarah looked up from the papers, surprised by the intensity in Andrew's eyes. "You don't have to thank me, Andrew. This family, this project, they've become an important part of my life." There was a moment of silence charged with electricity. Andrew slowly moved closer, taking Sarah's hand. "Sarah, he began, but was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Charles entered, not noticing the tension in the room. "Guys, you won't believe this. The National Entrepreneurs Foundation wants us to present our project at their annual conference." The moment between Andrew and Sarah dissipated, but something had changed. They both felt it, though neither dared to put it into words. The following days were a frenzy of preparations for the conference. Richard, excited about the opportunity, spent hours perfecting his presentation. Charles and Andrew immersed themselves in the logistical details, while Sarah coordinated with the mentors and apprentices who would accompany them. The night before departing for the conference, Richard gathered everyone for a family dinner. "Before we leave tomorrow," Richard began, his voice charged with emotion, "I want to thank you all. Charles, Andrew, you've shown a strength and commitment that fills me with pride. And Sarah," he said, turning to her, "you've been a blessing to this family. I don't know what we would have done without you." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. You've become my family too." The dinner proceeded in a warm and familiar atmosphere, filled with laughter and anecdotes. However, Andrew couldn't help but cast furtive glances at Sarah, and she, in turn, felt a tingle every time their eyes met. The next morning, the group departed for the conference. The event was even bigger than they had imagined, with hundreds of entrepreneurs and leaders from across the country. During the presentation, Richard spoke passionately about the power of redemption and the importance of giving second chances. Charles shared his own transformation experience, moving the audience. Andrew presented the tangible results of the program, while Sarah spoke about the emotional impact on the participants. At the end of the presentation, the ovation was deafening. The Whitakers and Sarah were surrounded by people interested in replicating the program in their own communities. Amidst the bustle, Andrew noticed that Sarah seemed overwhelmed. Without thinking twice, he took her hand and guided her to a nearby balcony. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern. Sarah nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, it's just that sometimes I forget how big this has all become. It's overwhelming." Andrew looked at her, admiring how the evening light illuminated her face. "Sarah, there's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time." But before he could continue, they were interrupted by Charles, who was looking for them for an interview with an important journalist. That night, during the gala dinner closing the conference, Richard was approached by an elegant middle-aged woman. "Richard Whitaker," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Elena Vega, director of the New Horizons Foundation. I'm impressed with your project and would like to discuss a possible collaboration." Richard shook her hand, intrigued. "It would be a pleasure, Mrs. Vega. Why don't you join our table?" As they dined, Elena shared her ideas for expanding the mentoring program nationwide. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and soon everyone at the table was immersed in an animated discussion about the possibilities. However, Sarah couldn't help but notice something familiar about Elena. There was something in her way of speaking, in her gestures, that reminded her of someone, though she couldn't pinpoint who. As the night progressed, Andrew finally found a moment to speak alone with Sarah. "Sarah," he began, his heart beating fast, "I've been trying to find the right moment to tell you this. I think I've fallen in love with you." Sarah looked at him, her eyes shining with contained emotion. "Andrew, But before she could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of glass breaking. They turned to see Richard, pale as a ghost, staring at Elena Vega. "Elizabeth," Richard whispered, his voice barely audible. It can't be. Elena, or Elizabeth, looked at Richard with a mixture of shock and recognition. Richard, after all these years? The silence that followed was deafening. Charles and Andrew looked confused from their father to the woman they had just met as Elena Vega. Sarah, for her part, began to put the pieces together, remembering the old photographs Richard had shown her of his late wife. "Mom?" Charles's voice broke the silence, laden with disbelief and emotion. Elizabeth Elena looked at her sons, tears forming in her eyes. "Charles, Andrew, my boys." The revelation fell like a bomb on the party. Nearby guests began to murmur, while the Whittaker family found themselves at the center of an emotional whirlwind. Richard, recovering from the initial shock, took control of the situation. "I think we need to talk in private," he said, his voice shaky but firm. As the family retreated to a private room, Sarah stayed behind, her mind spinning. The woman everyone believed dead was alive. What would this mean for the family she had come to love? And what would happen with Andrew's newly confessed feelings? As the door closed behind the Whittaker family and the woman who was once Elizabeth Whittaker, Sarah realized that this revelation would change everything. The past and present were colliding in a way no one could have foreseen, and the consequences of this encounter would resonate in their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The tension in the private room was palpable. Richard, Charles, and Andrew stared at Elizabeth Elena, a mixture of shock, confusion, and pain on their faces. The silence stretched for what seemed like an eternity, until finally Elizabeth spoke. "I know I owe you an explanation," she began, her voice trembling. "What I did, faking my death, was the biggest mistake of my life." Richard, who had remained silent until that moment, finally found his voice. "Why, Elizabeth? Why did you make us believe you were dead all these years?" Elizabeth took a deep breath before continuing. "The company was in trouble, Richard, more than I let you know. There were debts, threats. I thought if I disappeared, if I faked my death, the creditors would stop pressuring, and you could save the company without the burden I represented." Charles, who had been listening with growing anger, exploded. "A burden? You were our mother. Do you have any idea what your death did to us?" Andrew, always the calmer one, put a hand on his brother's shoulder. "Charles, let her finish. We need to hear the whole story," Elizabeth continued, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I went to South America, started a new life as Elena Vega. But not a day went by that I didn't think of you, that I didn't regret my decision. When I heard about the mentoring project, when I saw what you had accomplished, I knew I had to come back, that I had to try to make things right." Richard, who had aged years in a matter of minutes, spoke with a tired voice. "Elizabeth, do you have any idea what your death did to us? I spent years blaming myself, thinking I had somehow failed you. The boys grew up without their mother." "I know," Elizabeth interrupted, her voice broken by sobs, "and I'll live with that regret for the rest of my life. But I'm here now asking for a chance to explain myself, to try to repair the damage I caused." As the conversation continued, filled with recriminations, tears, and painful truths, Sarah waited outside, her heart heavy for the family she had come to love. She thought of Andrew, of the interrupted confession, of how this revelation would change everything. Hours later, the door finally opened. The Whittaker family emerged, all with red eyes and exhausted expressions. Richard approached Sarah. "Sarah," he said, his voice tired but warm, "thank you for waiting. I think you should hear this too. You've been part of our family, and you deserve to know the truth." Sarah nodded, following Richard back into the room. Elizabeth looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "So you're Sarah," Elizabeth said softly. "I've heard a lot about you tonight. Thank you for taking care of my family when I couldn't." Sarah, not knowing what to say, simply nodded. Richard took the floor. "We've decided that Elizabeth, Eleanor, will stay for a while. There's a lot to resolve, a lot to heal. But we believe it's important to try for everyone's sake." Charles and Andrew, though visibly exhausted, nodded in agreement. "It won't be easy," Andrew added, his gaze briefly meeting Sarah's. "But if anything this project has taught us, it's the power of redemption and second chances." The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. The news that Elizabeth Whittaker was alive leaked to the press, creating a media frenzy. The mentoring project, ironically, gained even more attention, with many seeing the Whitaker story as a powerful example of reconciliation and forgiveness. Sarah found herself in the middle of it all, supporting the family as they dealt with this new reality. She saw how Richard struggled between past pain and hope for a new beginning. She observed Charles and Andrew trying to reconnect with the mother they thought they had lost. And in the midst of all this, Sarah and Andrew barely had time to talk about the interrupted confession on the balcony. Their gazes often crossed, laden with unspoken emotions, but there was always something more urgent to attend to. One night, weeks after Elizabeth's return, Sarah found herself alone in the project office, reviewing some documents. Andrew entered, gently closing the door behind him. "Sarah," he said, his voice soft but determined, "I think it's time we finished that conversation we started on the balcony." Sarah looked at him, her heart beating fast. "Andrew, But before she could continue, the door burst open. It was Elizabeth, her face pale and her hands trembling. "Andrew, Sarah," she said, her voice urgent, "I need your help. I've made a terrible mistake, and I think I've put the entire family in danger." Andrew and Sarah looked at each other, confusion and concern quickly replacing the moment of intimacy. What new secret was about to be revealed? And how would this affect the already fragile reconciliation of the Whitaker family? As Elizabeth began to speak, Sarah realized that the path to true redemption and happiness was going to be much more complicated than any of them had imagined. And in the midst of all this, her own feelings for Andrew would have to wait once again. Elizabeth collapsed into a chair, her face a mask of anguish and guilt. Andrew and Sarah exchanged concerned looks before sitting down across from her. "Mom," Andrew said softly, "what's going on? What mistake have you made?" Elizabeth took a deep breath before beginning. "When I decided to fake my death, I didn't do it alone. I had help from someone dangerous." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Who, Elizabeth?" "His name is Victor Blackwood," Elizabeth responded, her voice barely a whisper. "He's a powerful man with connections to organized crime. He helped me disappear, to create my new identity as Elena Vega. But in exchange, I owed him a favor." Andrew leaned forward, his face tense. "What kind of favor, Mom?" Elizabeth closed her eyes, as if the weight of her words was too much to bear. "Information about the companies the New Horizons Foundation worked with. Victor used that information to blackmail and extort those companies." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "Elizabeth, are you saying you've been passing confidential information to a criminal?" Elizabeth nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I did it for years, convincing myself I had no choice. But when I saw what Richard and you were doing with the mentoring project, I knew I had to stop, that I had to try to make things right." Andrew stood up, pacing the room. "Oh my God, Mom! Do you have any idea what this could mean for the project? For the whole family?" "I know," Elizabeth sobbed. "And the worst part is that Victor isn't willing to let me go so easily. He's threatened me, and the whole family." Sarah, always practical, intervened. "Elizabeth, we need to know exactly what information you've shared and with whom, and we need to alert Richard and Charles immediately." The following hours were a whirlwind of activity. Richard and Charles were informed of the situation, and the Whitaker family found themselves in crisis once again. The difficult decision was made to contact the authorities, knowing that doing so would mean exposing not only Elizabeth's actions, but potentially endangering the reputation of the mentoring project. While Richard and Charles worked with lawyers and the police, Andrew and Sarah dedicated themselves to reviewing every aspect of the project, trying to determine if any part had been compromised by Elizabeth's actions. One night, as they worked late in the office, Andrew finally addressed the topic that had been pending between them. "Sarah," he began, his voice soft but determined, "I know this isn't the best time, but I need to know, what do you feel for me?" Sarah looked up from the documents she was reviewing, her eyes meeting Andrew's. For a moment, the chaos surrounding them seemed to fade away. "Andrew," she responded, her voice barely a whisper, I have feelings for you too. But with everything that's happening..." Andrew moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I know it's complicated, but Sarah, if I've learned anything from all this, it's that life is too short not to be honest about our feelings." Just as it seemed they were about to kiss, the office door burst open. It was Charles, his face a mask of concern. "Andrew, Sarah," he said, not noticing the intimacy of the moment he had just interrupted. "We have a problem. Victor Blackwood has contacted Dad. He wants a meeting." The tension in the room was palpable. Andrew stood up, his face hardening. "When?" "Tomorrow night," Charles responded. "At the old warehouse by the port." Sarah intervened, her voice laden with concern. "You can't go alone. It's too dangerous." "I agree," said Andrew. "We have to inform the police." Charles shook his head. "Dad doesn't want to involve the authorities yet. He says he wants to see what Blackwood wants first." The three looked at each other, aware of the danger they faced. Finally, Andrew spoke. "We'll go, all three of us," he said firmly. "Together. We won't leave Dad alone in this." Sarah nodded, her determination matching Andrew's. 4. "I'm going too." The following night, the group headed to the meeting point. Richard, despite his son's protests, insisted on being present. Elizabeth, consumed by guilt, stayed at home, unable to face Blackwood. The warehouse was dark and silent when they arrived. Richard entered first, closely followed by his sons and Sarah. In the center of the empty space, illuminated by a single spotlight, stood Victor Blackwood. "Richard Whittaker," Blackwood said, his voice cold and calculating. "I see you've brought the whole family. How touching." Richard stepped forward. "What do you want, Blackwood?" Blackwood smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I want what's owed to me. Elizabeth has been very useful to me for years, but now that she's decided to redeem herself, I find myself in an uncomfortable position. If you think we're going to continue your extortion game, you're very wrong," Charles intervened, his voice laden with anger. Blackwood clicked his tongue. "Oh, Charles, always so impetuous. No, I don't want to continue Elizabeth's collaboration. What I want is compensation for the income I'll lose." "Compensation?" Andrew asked, his voice tense. "What kind of compensation?" "Simple," Blackwood responded. "I want control of the mentoring project. It's a perfect operation for money laundering and expanding my business interests." The shock was evident on everyone's faces. Richard was the first to recover. "Never," he said, his voice firm. "That project is to help people, not for your dirty business." Blackwood sighed dramatically. "I was hoping you'd say that, Richard. That's why I took the liberty of acquiring a bit of insurance." With a snap of his fingers, the warehouse lights came on, revealing several armed men surrounding them, and in a corner, tied up and gagged, was Elizabeth. "Mom!" Charles and Andrew shouted in unison. Sarah, who had been observing silently, stepped forward. "This doesn't have to end like this, Blackwood. Think about it. If anything happens to us, the authorities will come after you. You won't be able to hide forever." Blackwood looked at her curiously. "The famous Sarah. I've heard a lot about you. You've got guts, I'll give you that. But you don't understand who you're dealing with." Suddenly, the sound of sirens was heard in the distance. Blackwood frowned, looking around suspiciously. "What have you done?" he growled. Richard smiled for the first time that night. "We're not as naive as you think, Blackwood. We may not have brought the police with us, but we took precautions." The sirens were rapidly approaching. Blackwood, visibly agitated, began shouting orders to his men. In the confusion that followed, Andrew and Charles took advantage to free Elizabeth, while Richard and Sarah kept Blackwood's attention. Just as the police burst into the warehouse, Blackwood pulled out a gun, aiming directly at Richard. Without thinking twice, Sarah threw herself between them. "No!" Andrew shouted, lunging forward. The sound of a gunshot echoed through the warehouse, followed by screams and the chaos of police arresting Blackwood and his men. When the dust settled, Andrew was holding Sarah in his arms, his shirt stained with blood. "Sarah, please, hold on," he pleaded, tears in his eyes. Richard, Charles, and Elizabeth gathered around them, their faces a mixture of shock and terror. As paramedics rushed into the warehouse, the Whittaker family found themselves united like never before, facing this new crisis together. Would Sarah survive? How would this traumatic event affect the family and the project? And if Sarah recovered, what would this mean for her relationship with Andrew and her place in the Whittaker family? Everyone's fate hung by a thread, and the next few hours would be crucial in determining the future of the Whittaker family and everything they had built. Central City Hospital buzzed with activity, but for the Whittaker family, time seemed to have stopped. In the waiting room, Richard, Elizabeth, Charles, and Andrew waited for news about Sarah's condition, each second an eternity of anguish and hope. Andrew paced back and forth, unable to stay still. His hands, still stained with Sarah's blood, trembled slightly. "Why is it taking so long?" he murmured, more to himself than to the others. Elizabeth approached her son, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Andrew, darling, the doctors are doing everything they can. We have to be patient." Richard, sitting with his head in his hands, finally spoke. "This is my fault. If I hadn't—" "No, Dad," Charles interrupted firmly. "This is Blackwood's fault, and he'll pay for what he's done." Just then, a doctor entered the waiting room. Everyone stood up, holding their breath. "Family of Sarah Thompson," the doctor began, his face serious but not grim. "The operation was a success. The bullet didn't damage any vital organs, but she lost a lot of blood. The next 24 hours will be critical, but we're optimistic about her recovery." A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Andrew, unable to contain his tears, asked, "Can we see her?" The doctor nodded. "You can go in one at a time, but only for a few minutes. She needs to rest." Andrew was the first to enter Sarah's room. Seeing her there, pale and connected to machines, made his heart constrict. He approached the bed, gently taking her hand. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice broken with emotion. "Please, you have to get better. I love you. And I promise that if you make it through this, I'll never let anything come between us again." In the days that followed, Sarah's room became the center of gravity for the Whitaker family. They took turns being with her, talking to her, reading to her, simply being present. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, news of Blackwood's extortion attempt and Sarah's heroism had spread quickly. To everyone's surprise, instead of damaging the reputation of the mentoring project, the story had inspired the community. Hundreds of people came forward as volunteers, eager to support a cause that had demonstrated such courage and integrity. A week after the incident, Sarah finally opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was Andrew's face, who had fallen asleep holding her hand. "Andrew," she murmured weakly. Andrew woke with a start, his eyes lighting up as he saw Sarah conscious. "Sarah, thank God. How do you feel?" Sarah tried to smile, though the effort was visible. "Like I've been hit by a truck. But I'm alive." Andrew couldn't contain himself any longer. Leaning in, he gently kissed her lips. "I love you, Sarah, and I promise I'll never lose the chance to tell you that again." Tears of happiness rolled down Sarah's cheeks. "I love you too, Andrew, and I don't regret what I did. You're my family." News of Sarah's recovery spread quickly. Richard, Elizabeth, and Charles entered the room, their faces a mixture of relief and joy. "Sarah," Richard said, his voice laden with emotion, "there are no words to thank you for what you've done for this family. You risked your life for us." Elizabeth, with tears in her eyes, added, "You've taught us the true meaning of love and sacrifice. Thank you for bringing this family back together." Charles, always the most emotionally reserved, simply took Sarah's hand and squeezed it gently. "Welcome back, little sister." In the weeks that followed, as Sarah recovered, the Whitaker family worked tirelessly to rebuild and strengthen the mentoring project. The story of their struggle against corruption and their dedication to the cause inspired more people than they could have ever imagined. Victor Blackwood was tried and convicted, his extortion network dismantled. Elizabeth, in an act of redemption, testified against him, also facing the legal consequences of her own past actions. A month after leaving the hospital, Sarah found herself in the Garden of Golden Sunset nursing home, surrounded by the Whitaker family and dozens of participants from the mentoring program. Richard, standing in front of everyone, raised a glass. "Today we celebrate not only Sarah's recovery," he began, his voice full of pride and emotion, "but also the rebirth of our family and this project. We've faced challenges we never imagined, but we've emerged stronger and more united than ever." Andrew, with his arm around Sarah, continued, "And it's thanks to Sarah that we're here today. She taught us the true meaning of courage, love, and dedication." Sarah, blushing at the attention, took the floor. "I didn't do anything you wouldn't have done for me. This family, this project, they've given me a purpose and a home, and I promise to dedicate every day to honoring that gift." As applause filled the air, Andrew knelt in front of Sarah, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Sarah Thompson," he said, his voice trembling slightly, Would you do me the honor of officially becoming part of this crazy family? Will you marry me?" The garden fell silent, everyone holding their breath as they waited for Sarah's answer. With tears of happiness in her eyes, Sarah nodded. "Yes, Andrew. 1,000 times yes." Cheers and applause erupted as Andrew placed the ring on Sarah's finger and kissed her passionately. Richard, Elizabeth, and Charles joined them in a group hug, symbolizing the unbreakable bond they now shared. As the sun set over the garden, bathing the scene in a warm golden glow, the Whittaker family realized they had found something more valuable than any business empire. They had found the true meaning of family, love, and redemption. But even in this moment of happiness, none of them could imagine the new challenges and surprises that fate still had in store for them. The Whittaker story was far from over, and the most exciting chapter was just beginning.